I would always want people to be capable of change, and even the worst people, I would hope, are capable of change. I nurture hope for Putin, or at least I nurtured hope for Putin until it became clear to me that he was already dead. I still nurture hope for Russia and for those people in charge. And in the same way, I I would hope for a turnaround by Nadine Dorries, by Liz Truss, by Boris Johnson, and so on. But I don't think these people should be earmarked as icons of the future. Yes, they can turn around their own lives. They can dedicate themselves to charity. They can do some good to offset the great harm that they have caused our society. But Robert Jenrick is a young individual who was born in 1982 in Wolverhampton. He went to Wolverhampton Grammar School before going on to St John's College in Cambridge, and he then pursued law. Very good so far. When he was elected as an MP for Newark, succeeding Patrick Mercer, it followed Mercer's involvement in a lobbying scandal, and it helped to stabilise the seat. But it wouldn't have mattered whether this was for the Conservatives or the Labour Party or the Liberal Party. It wouldn't have mattered. It was a new broom that presaged hope in a situation where there was a lot of mess. He then went on to become the permanent private secretary for the parliamentary private secretary for Esther McVey, and then Michael Gove. Not a really good start. Both of those people have a lot of baggage, particularly Gove. But he climbed his way up the system and was then involved in housing and planning. And during this time, he was involved in the approval of a housing development for Richard Desmond, a Conservative donor, which led to accusations of cash for favours. And although Jenrick denied any wrongdoing, the controversy highlighted the complexities and the challenges of his role. In 1922, he was appointed Minister of State for Immigration, a critical role within the Home Office, and his responsibilities included managing immigration policy, asylum issues and border security. You can't get any bigger than that, really, unless you happen to be the Home Office Minister. This was the key job, implementing the government's agenda for controlling illegal migration and improving the efficiency of the UK's immigration system. His approach was characterised by efforts to tighten immigration control, although it was met with criticism and challenges. And this is despite the fact that he also has a strong interest in cultural and heritage matters, often speaking about the importance of preserving Britain's historical sites. His involvement in the arts during his career at Christie's has informed his contribution to debates on cultural policies, and I think it's a sadness that we've seen less of that and more of the thuggish stuff. His bid for credibility in the face of criticism began with his expressed regrets over the cartoon that he demanded should be stripped away in the centre earmarked for processing child migrants. This marked a significant moment, I felt, of self-reflection and a public acknowledgement of a misstep. But it wasn't the only sign that suggested that he was prepared to change. Other indicators included his public apologies and his accountability, regret over the cartoon. He made efforts to publicly apologise, which indicated his willingness to take responsibility and to correct the course in response to public opinion and criticism. And he also indicated a shift in his approach to migration policy, emphasising more humane and balanced considerations in his rhetoric. And this change suggested he was moving away from the hardline Priti Patel, Suella Braverman stance towards a more empathetic and nuanced approach, aligning his actions with broader public expectations. Britain, essentially, is a country that promotes fairness and humanity and friendship. And these are benefits to civilization, not problems with civilization. These are the things that we should hold out as positives. And his engagement with various stakeholders, including charities and advocacy groups, by opening dialogues with those previously critical of his policies, Jenrick demonstrated a willingness to listen and to incorporate diverse perspectives into his decision-making process. These actions taken together signalled that he was aware of the need to rebuild his credibility and was making efforts to align his public persona with more responsible and considered leadership. But his proposals that he should bring Boris back into a cabinet role make it quite clear this is all wallpaper. There is no credibility in his transformation, in his metanoia. It's gobbledygook. It's rhetoric, not reality. He's saying what his PR people have advised him to say rather than what comes from his gut, which is extraordinary, given the fact that, this is a person who has who has a bedrock in sound common sense. I admire people who have been through St. John's and through the legal process. This is a solid grounding. There are some legal training. There's some legal training that I think is just memory work. St. John's, I know, works hard to make people think. Clearly not hard enough in the case of Robert Jenrick. And this is about thinking. This isn't about his public image. The same thing is true, incidentally, of people in the Johnson family. Johnson's father. Yes, appalling, dissolute life, really. His treatment of his wife and so on, appalling. But it can't disguise the fact that, face to face, he is an absolute charmer and a delight. But one shouldn't be mistaken. One shouldn't be deluded or sucked into that charisma, because that's what it is. In the same way, his Boris Johnson's sister, she comes across very well on the radio. I found her quite abrasive in real life, and I hold my hands up and I say, let's try and reset the clock. But Johnson père is one thing. Johnson himself, Boris Johnson, is quite another. He has already committed such errors of judgment. He has already taken the country in such a direction. It's going to be so difficult to recover. He should never be handed the reins of power again. And simply for PR, for a PR pledge, it isn't worth it. In social media, there's a very blunt understanding of what is right and what is wrong. You're either in one tribe or you're in another tribe. And life isn't like that. Life is much more nuanced. And I like to see the nuance, and I like to see the possibility for change. But there comes a point where, I know the popular term is red line, but there comes a point where a red line is crossed. There comes a point where you have to say no more. And I think that point has come with Jenrick. Jenrick's decision-making ability is exposed as weak in the same way as Boris Johnson's decision-making ability was exposed as weak. The two are aligned. It doesn't surprise me, really, that Jenrick is recommending Boris. Boris would recommend Jenrick, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and both of them should be dumped. Neither of them should be given a second thought, and I gave Jenrick significantly more leeway than I've given other people. I've tried to see positives in Priti Patel. I can't. I've tried to see them in Suella Braverman. Well, I've not tried very hard. And Tom Tugendhat, I continue trying. I believe that any government should be supported by a good, robust and effective opposition. And this, I think, is the role of the Conservative Party, at least for the next 5 years. And without a good leader, the Conservative Party cannot do a good job. And we've seen what a poor opposition can lead to. A poor opposition leads to a tyrannous disregard for procedure and for good policy. Under Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party was self-indulgent, self-obsessed and distracted. And it was not able to hold the government of the day, the Conservative government of the day, to account. Under Keir Starmer, it's worked a little better, but Keir Starmer has had to spend a lot of time repairing the damage done by Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, not a bad man at all. A man with a good heart, and I know his brother, and certainly his brother has a good heart, completely loopy, but his heart is in the right place, and he means well. Doesn't mean he's a good leader. It certainly doesn't mean that Jeremy Corbyn was a good leader. But we need slightly more than people who are well-intentioned. We need, in the same way as we need slightly more than people who are charming. We need people who are decisive, who are effective, and who are ethically emboldened. Now, one of those is not enough. And somebody who is well-intentioned but foolish is a danger. And we've seen plenty of those. Somebody who is charming but lazy, we've seen those as well. And someone who is lazy and useless, we've seen that too. We've seen people who try to be somebody else. We've seen at least two individuals trying desperately to be Margaret Thatcher and believing the nonsense peddled by the BBC and by the media and by social media that Thatcher didn't listen and that Thatcher was strongest because she was myopic and drove for a particular goal. It's not true. It's a misreading of everything that she was. And there's plenty of literature to read if somebody wants to ape Mrs. Thatcher, which I think is a silly thing to do anyway. One should be oneself. A better version of oneself, perhaps, than actually exists, but one should start with self. And starting with trying to be somebody else and not doing that very well and not having done the homework to justify being somebody else is stupidity in the extreme. Liz Truss is a really good example of that. Theresa May is a good second. Both of them tried to be somebody that they weren't. Boris Johnson, sadly, was exactly who he was, and who he was became more and more evident. But there was nothing to surprise us in Boris Johnson as a liar. He'd done it so often before. He just did it magnificently as Prime Minister. And there was nothing to surprise us in Boris as lazy. He'd done that so often before. He just did it more magnificently in number 10. People are themselves, but people can change. And if we take the view that nobody can change, then we are living in a very pessimistic society. Jenrick could change. Jenrick could be better than what he has been. But while he promotes Boris, I think that's a bad thing. Boris, Liz Truss, Theresa May, they can all change, but they should do so privately, and they should commit themselves to charity work and focus on rehabilitating themselves rather than changing their public image in their lifetime. They should take John Profumo as their advocate and exemplar. John Profumo is who they should model their future life on, commit themselves to charity, get out of the limelight, and repent for the damage that they've caused our society. And I wish them well.